Hi friends, another video. Today we're going to talk about what I call double stop arpeggios. Just a name. You might think of it as playing the same arpeggio in two different voices at the same time. Doesn't really matter what we call it. Hopefully it's something that might give you some ideas about ways to incorporate some different approaches into your playing. Particularly as guitarists, we can't really compete with pianists who can play these big, very full harmonic content with their 10 fingers and the sustain pedal and getting all these big textures. And we, as guitarists, can't do that really, not very effectively. So how can we do more with less? And that's kind of where this concept is coming from. So hopefully it can give you some ideas in both for your comping and even for some solo ideas, especially comping in more sparse settings. So let's get into it. I'm going to start with just some examples of going through a handful of the common chord types like major 7, dominant 7, minor 7 flat 5, diminished. Not going to go through all the others, but there's plenty of other things you can do with it. But let's start with that. So what I'm going to do is take an example. I'll use E as an example today. So an E major 7 arpeggio, starting with the E on the 7th fret of the 5th string. So that's root, 3rd, 5th, 7th, simple E major 7 arpeggio. I'm going to play that, but I'm also going to play it in parallel with another arpeggio, also an E major 7 arpeggio, but begin on the 7th. So I'm starting with this interval of a major 7th. So I'm starting on the root for the lower voice, and for the upper voice, I'm starting on the 7th. So I would play the 7th, the root, the 3rd, and the 5th. So again, that would be D sharp, E, G sharp, B against the lower voice, and we put them together, we get this. And if we extend it a little bit in the range, going up to the major 7th in the top voice and up to the root on the lower voice, and you even get these lower sounds too. So again, I'm just playing an arpeggio in two different places in parallel for that same chord. So it's a little weird to finger. I'm using my pick on the lower voice and my middle finger on the upper voice. So you can see that. You can finger it however you want. Sometimes I switch fingers, whatever is more comfortable. So that's a major 7. To play a dominant 7, we simply lower the 7th degree. So we get this sound. To play a minor 7, we lower the 3rd degree. To play a minor 7 flat 5, we lower the 5th. Lower the 5th. And to get a diminished 7th, we would, let's start from the top this time, we would lower the 7th, becomes double flatted, so you get this. Right, so those are some of the chord types, and that's sort of the concept here, is playing the same arpeggio from two different voices in parallel, and you can stagger them if you want to get more of a single note sound, or what I call double stops. So either way is fine. It's a good idea, probably, at least what I found with this is a good idea to learn those chord types in at least a couple different positions. We started with the root on the 5th string. If we went to the root on the 6th string, let's go down a little bit, maybe use G as an example. So a G major 7 would have a lot of the same shapes, but somewhat different. So you got to learn those in different locations on the neck. So I'm thinking G down here. Again, this is G major 7 arpeggios. This would be the octave higher of that same arpeggio. So, learn those in those two different positions, all the different chord types, and then what can you do with it? Well, you can do a lot of stuff with it. So I'm going to take a tune like Bluesette, which reason for taking this tune is it has a bunch of 2-5-1s in it in different keys, and it's a really good exercise for this idea to get to know these shapes and these sounds all over the fingerboard. So Bluesette's a waltz. I'm going to play it fairly slow, and I'll just play through the changes so you can hear how this idea can be potentially used through a set of chord changes. So I'll start up high. So just one way. I mean, you can do it tons of different ways and a mixture of however you want just to move around, but learning those things in different positions, being able to move to different chord shapes, and then they'll be there under your fingers. It takes a little while to get used to playing with the right hand this way if you're not comfortable with that, but it can be a very useful sound, so hopefully you can get some use out of that. A couple other things I thought worth mentioning before ending would be maybe extending this to some other conceptual things, like, for example, most of us, for me, the dominant sound that I gave you at the beginning, the E7, that, like a plain dominant 7 sounds really vanilla to me. So that sound I don't like too much. A nice way to alter it fairly simply is to actually move the root up to the flat 9. So I'm playing again an E7 arpeggio in two different voices, but I'm gonna move the E to an F. So instead of it'll be a rootless voicing. We'll have the flat 9, the 3rd, the 5th, and the flat 7th, which is essentially a diminished chord. So we're gonna end up with this kind of a sound. So that's a little bit more colorful for a dominant to my ear. Anyway, so that's another thing, and I think I probably used that in the example I played in Bluesette, because those a lot of dominant chords, and they need a little spice to them. Another thing that's kind of interesting with this similar concept of extending the use of this idea would be like if you wanted more of an upper structure sound, like, for example, a minor 9th. How can you get that using this? Well, again, using a rootless voicing, like if I play like a C minor 9 chord, which you probably all know this way, if you move to the flatted 3rd, really began on the flatted 3rd, or thought of that as the root momentarily, those notes against the C, the fundamental, would be, again, I'm thinking of E flat major 7. So here's an E flat major 7 arpeggio against the C minor. And what does that give us? It gives us the 9th. It takes away the root and gives us the 9th. So that's a way to get a little bit more of the upper structure of the sound. Another one that's kind of cool that I find useful is like a Lydian sound. Like if I want to play a G, for example, I'm using G as an example with the sharp 11, a Lydian sound. If you go to the 5th degree of that chord, which is a D, and play its major 7th, that would contain the Lydian note in G, the C sharp. So this is like I would think of this as a G Lydian arpeggio. So that's another cool use for it. Same shape, just in a different location. Another use I've been finding for this idea is on a sus flat 9 sound, a fairly modernish sound, like I'm using E as an example with a suspended, and the suspension, the 11th essentially, the 4th or the 11th, however you want to think about it, with the flat 9, the F. It contains like a B minor 7 flat 5 sound in there, so this kind of a sound, sorry, not that one. I'm thinking of it in terms of the concept we're discussing, which is arpeggios for 7th chords. The 7th chord in this case being a B minor 7 flat 5, but it's used in the context to sound out a 7th with a flat 9 against E. So again, if we think of E as our root, but play a B minor 7 flat 5 chord, well, against that E, the B becomes the 5th, the F becomes the flat 9, the A becomes the 11th or the suspension, and the D is the flat 7th. So this is a flat 7, this is that flat 7, 9, I'm sorry, 7th with a flatted 9, suspended 7th with a flatted 9 sound. So if we play that B minor flat 5 arpeggio idea, it gives us that. So it's a kind of a cool sound. So another one of just many that you can get from this idea to enhance some of the upper structures of the harmonies to extend your vocabulary. So hope these things help. Again, it's a way to cover a little bit more harmonic ground for guitarists as opposed to the pianists who can do a lot with their instrument and just the mechanics of it. We simply have some limitations that we need to come to grips with, and this might be a way to help you get into that realm and expand both your harmonic and your melodic content. So hopefully this was helpful, and see you in the next one.